You're not a farmer, you're an engineer. And the moment you see your homestead that way, everything changes. Right now, most backyard growers are running their property like a grocery store with animals in it. You buy feed, you buy fertilizer, you buy soil amendments. Every single month you haul bags from the store, and every month the bill gets bigger. But what if your chickens fed your garden fed your chickens, your compost fed your soil, and your soil fed everything else in one continuous loop that never stops? That's not a fantasy. That's a system. It's been working on small farms for centuries before the feed industry convinced us we needed them. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the exact backyard loop that eliminates your feed store dependency. I'm going to walk you through every connection point, every rotation, every element that makes this loop self-sustaining. And I'll show you the common mistakes that break the cycle before it ever gets started. This isn't about working harder. It's about designing smarter. Here's the reality most homesteaders don't want to admit. You're spending $600 to $1,200 a year on chicken feed alone. Layer pellets, scratch grains, supplements, grit. Every month, another trip to the feed store. Every season, the price creeps up another 5% to 10%. And that's just the chickens. Add in fertilizer for your garden beds, soil amendments every spring, compost you're buying in bags instead of making, pest control products, seed starting mixes. You're running 5 or 6 separate systems on your property, and every single one requires an outside input. Every single one costs money. Every single one makes you dependent on a supply chain you don't control. That's not a homestead. That's a subscription service with chickens. And the worst part, the outputs from one system are literally the inputs another system needs. Your chicken manure sits in a pile while you buy bagged fertilizer. Your kitchen scraps go in the trash while you buy compost. Your garden produces pest habitat while you spray chemicals to fight them. You're throwing away free resources with one hand and buying replacements with the other. The feed industry loves this. Garden centers love this. They've built an entire economy around keeping each system isolated, so you keep buying inputs for all of them separately. Meanwhile, your property already produces almost everything it needs. You're just not connecting the pieces. The loop exists. You're just not running it yet. This isn't new. This isn't experimental. This is how farming actually worked before corporations got involved. Go back 200 years. Every small farm operated as a closed loop. Chickens scratched through garden beds after harvest. Their manure fed the soil. The soil grew crops. Crop waste fed the animals. Kitchen scraps went to the compost pile, or straight to the flock. Nothing left the property. Nothing needed to come in. Farmers didn't call it permaculture. They didn't call it regenerative agriculture. They just called it farming, because that's what farming was, a loop. Then the feed industry showed up, and suddenly chickens needed pellets from a factory. Gardens needed synthetic fertilizer from a plant. Soil needed amendments from a bag. Every natural connection between systems got severed and replaced with a product you had to buy. And they didn't just sell you the product. They sold you the idea that the old way didn't work, that you needed their inputs, that natural systems were primitive and unreliable. That was a lie. And the proof is in the soil. Lady Eve Balfour demonstrated this in the 1940s with her rotation systems. Chickens cycling through grazing pens and scratching pens, feeding themselves on forage and composted insects, regenerating the soil beneath them. No feed store required. Traditional farmers across Asia, Africa, and South America have been running integrated animal garden loops for centuries. Ducks in rice paddies, chickens in orchards, goats clearing brush that feeds the compost that feeds the garden. The knowledge never disappeared. It was just buried under marketing budgets. Today, you're going to dig it back up. Number 1 is the chicken tractor, your free labor force. The loop starts with your chickens, but not locked in a static coop, moving. A chicken tractor is a lightweight movable enclosure you rotate across your garden beds. You plant a fast-growing cover crop, clover, buckwheat, ryegrass. Let it grow for a few weeks. Then move the tractor onto that bed. Your chickens spend 2 to 3 weeks in that spot. They eat the greens. They hunt beetles, larvae, slugs. They scratch through the soil looking for worms and grubs. And while they do all that, they're depositing manure directly into the bed. By the time you move them to the next bed, the first bed is cleared, weeded, fertilized, and ready for your next crop. No tilling, no fertilizer bags, no pest spray. The chickens did it all. Here's the number that matters. A single chicken produces roughly 1 cubic foot of manure per month. A flock of 8 birds rotating through 4 beds gives you 8 cubic feet of high nitrogen fertilizer every month, placed exactly where your food grows. That's $200 worth of amendments per year you'll never buy again. And you didn't add a single task to your day. You just moved a tractor every 2 weeks. But the tractor is just the starting gear. Number 2 is perennial feed crops, the plants that replace your feed bill. This is where the loop starts feeding itself. Instead of buying bags of layer pellets every month, you grow what your chickens need, and you plant it once. Comfrey along your property borders, moringa in your sunniest spots. Tree collards near the coop for daily harvesting, Jerusalem artichoke in open ground where spreading is welcome. Each one fills a different gap. Moringa delivers 25 to 30% protein on a dry matter basis, higher than most commercial feeds. Comfrey pulls minerals from deep underground that surface plants can't reach. Jerusalem artichoke stores carbohydrate-rich tubers underground all winter. Tree collards produce fresh greens 365 days a year in most climates. Together, they mirror the nutritional profile of commercial feed. Protein, minerals, carbohydrates, fiber. Except you're growing it yourself for free after the first season. One moringa tree can produce several pounds of leaves per harvest every 2 to 3 weeks. A 10-foot row of comfrey gives you cuts every 4 to 5 weeks from spring through fall. A single Jerusalem artichoke patch produces more tubers than a small flock can eat. You're not supplementing anymore. You're replacing. And every dollar you stop spending at the feed store stays in your pocket. Now here's where the loop gets interesting. Those chickens eating your perennial feed crops and forage from the tractor rotation are producing something your garden desperately needs. Number 3 is the manure-to-compost pipeline. Every system produces waste. In a loop, waste doesn't exist. It just becomes the next input. Your chickens eat perennial feed crops and forage from the tractor rotation. They produce manure. That manure is the most valuable thing on your property if you use it right. Fresh chicken manure is too hot to apply directly to plants. It'll burn roots and kill seedlings. But run it through a composting system, or better yet, a worm farm, and it transforms into black gold. Worm castings from chicken manure are one of the most nutrient-dense soil amendments you can create, and the startup cost is under $50. A bin, some red wigglers, and your chicken's daily output. Within 60 to 90 days, you're producing finished castings that go straight into your garden beds. The same beds your chicken tractor already prepared. The same beds growing the food that feeds your family. One worm bin processing manure from 8 hens produces roughly 30 to 40 pounds of castings per month. That's enough to top dress every raised bed on a quarter-acre property, with extra to sell at $1 to $2 per pound. Your chickens feed the worms feed the soil feeds the garden, and the garden feeds the loop right back. Number 4 is garden waste back to the flock. The connection most people miss entirely. Your garden produces more chicken feed than you realize. Bolted lettuce, overgrown squash leaves, carrot tops, beet greens, windfall fruit, spent crops after harvest, all of it goes to the flock. A productive backyard garden on a quarter acre throws off 10 to 20 pounds of edible plant waste per week during peak season. That's feed you already grew. Feed that cost you nothing extra because the garden was producing food for your family anyway. The chickens eat the scraps. The nutrients cycle through their manure. The manure goes back to the compost or worm bin. The castings go back to the garden. See what's happening? Nothing leaves. Nothing needs to come in. Every output becomes an input somewhere else in the system. This is the fundamental difference between a homestead that costs money every month and one that sustains itself. You're not adding work. You're connecting work that's already happening. And if you really want to accelerate this loop, the next piece supercharges everything. Compost insects, the free protein factory. Here's the part that surprises people the most. Your compost pile isn't just making soil, it's breeding protein. Black soldier fly larvae thrive in compost systems. They're attracted to decomposing organic matter, the same kitchen scraps and garden waste you're already composting. A healthy colony produces pounds of larvae per week in warm months. That's enough supplemental protein for a flock of 12 to 15 birds without buying a single bag of mealworms or protein supplement. And the spent substrate after the larvae are done. It's pre-composted material that goes straight into your garden or worm bin. Waste feeds larvae, larvae feed chickens, chickens feed the compost breeds more larvae. The loop inside the loop, and it costs almost nothing to run. But we're not done yet. There's one more connection most backyard growers completely overlook. Bees. The invisible multiplier. Bees don't seem like they belong in a feeding loop, but they're the silent multiplier that makes everything else produce more. A single hive pollinates your fruit trees, your vegetable garden, your perennial feed crops, and your cover crops. More pollination means more fruit, more vegetables, more seed set on your clover and buckwheat. More food for your family and more forage for your flock. A well-managed hive requires zero feed. Bees forage on what's already growing on and around your property, and they produce honey, beeswax, and propolis. All usable, all sellable. One strong hive can produce 30 to 100 pounds of honey per year, depending on your forage availability. That's $300 to $1,000 in product from an animal that asks almost nothing from you. But the real value is what they do to your yields. Pollinated gardens produce 20% to 30% more than unpollinated ones. That means more food for your table, more waste for your compost, more scraps for your chickens, and more manure for your worm farm. Bees don't just join the loop, they amplify it. And that brings us to the piece that ties this entire system together. The closed loop design, where every output becomes an input. Here's the complete picture. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Chickens rotate through garden beds via the chicken tractor. They weed, debug, and fertilize as they go. Perennial feed crops along borders, and near the coop replace purchased feed. Chicken manure goes to the worm farm. Worm castings go to the garden beds. Garden waste and kitchen scraps go back to the flock and the compost. Compost breeds black soldier fly larvae for free protein. Bees pollinate everything, increasing yields across the entire property. Every system feeds the next. Every waste product becomes an input. Your costs go down while your production goes up. A starter loop of just chickens, plus a tractor rotation, plus one perennial feed crop can cut your annual feed bill by 30% in year one. Add the worm farm and compost insect system, and you're looking at 60% to 80% reduction. Run the full loop with all 7 connections, and you approach something most homesteaders only dream about. A property that feeds itself without a single trip to the feed store. You don't build this overnight. You start with one connection, get it running, then add the next, one gear at a time. Each new connection makes the whole system stronger and more self-sustaining. That's not just farming, that's engineering, and your backyard is the machine. I didn't believe this would actually work at first. 3 years ago, my feed bill was running about $85 a month for 12 hens. That's over $1,000 a year, just to keep chickens that were supposed to be saving me money on eggs. I was buying bagged compost for the garden twice a year, fertilizer every spring, mealworms as treats, pest spray for the squash bugs. I added it all up one night and realized I was spending almost $1,800 a year on inputs for a property that was supposed to be self-sufficient. That number made me sick, so I started small. I built a basic chicken tractor out of PVC and hardware cloth. Cost me about $40. I planted clover in 2 garden beds and started rotating the birds through on a 2-week schedule. First month, I noticed the beds the chickens worked through had almost 0 weeds. I didn't buy fertilizer that spring. Second month, I started a worm bin with the coop cleanings. Within 90 days, I had more castings than I could use. By the 4th month, I planted comfrey along my back fence and moringa in containers on the south side. The chickens went after those leaves like it was candy. I started cutting my pellet rations in half and supplementing with what I was growing. By the end of that first year, My feed bill dropped from $85 a month to about $30. My fertilizer cost went to zero. I hadn't bought compost in 8 months. That's when it clicked. I wasn't running separate systems anymore. I was running one loop, and the loop was feeding itself. Now let me save you some pain. These are the mistakes that break the loop before it ever gets momentum. Mistake 1 is starting everything at once. You get excited, you build the tractor, plant the moringa, start the worm bin, and order bees all in the same week. Then nothing gets proper attention, and systems fail before they establish. Start with one connection, the tractor rotation, and let it stabilize for 60 days before adding the next piece. Mistake 2 is not rotating the tractor fast enough. If your chickens sit on the same bed for more than 3 weeks, they'll strip it bare. The plants can't recover. The soil compacts, the loop breaks at the first link. 2 weeks per bed is the sweet spot. Set a reminder on your phone if you have to. Mistake 3 is putting fresh manure straight on garden beds. Chicken manure is hot, high nitrogen, and burns roots and kills young plants. It needs 60 to 90 days of composting or a pass through the worm bin first. Skip this step, and you'll damage the very garden beds your loop depends on. Mistake 4 is planting perennial feed crops too far from your daily routine. If your comfrey patch is in the back corner and your moringa is on the opposite side, you won't harvest consistently. Place perennial feed crops where you already walk every day, near the coop, along the path to the garden, beside the compost area. Convenience is what keeps the loop running long term. Mistake 5 is expecting 100% feed replacement in year 1. The loop reduces dependence gradually. First year, aim for 30%, second year push toward 60%. Full replacement takes mature perennials, established compost systems, and a seasonal rhythm. Give it time. The savings compound every single season. Picture your property 2 years from now. Your chicken tractor moves through garden beds on a schedule you barely think about. Perennial feed crops produce pounds of free nutrition every few weeks without replanting. Your worm farm turns coop waste into the best soil amendment money can't buy. Compost insects breed protein. Your flock devours. Bees quietly amplify every harvest across the entire property. You haven't been to the feed store in months. Your garden has never been more productive. Your chickens are healthier than they've ever been. Bright eyes, strong shells, deep orange yolks. Because they're eating fresh, diverse, natural food instead of monotonous pellets from a factory. Your annual input cost went from $1,500 or more down to a couple $100. That's money back in your pocket every single month. Not someday, not in theory, right now. And the best part? The loop gets stronger every year. Perennials mature and produce more. Soil biology deepens. Compost systems accelerate. Each season, your property becomes more self-sustaining, with less effort from you. That's not just a homestead. That's freedom. Real, measurable, permanent freedom from the supply chains and price hikes that control everyone else. What's the first connection in this loop you're going to build? The tractor rotation, the perennial feed crops, the worm farm. Drop it in the comments right now. I read every single one, and your answer might help someone else figure out where to start. If this video changed how you think about your property, subscribe and hit the bell. I post practical systems like this every single week. Real strategies that save real money on real homesteads. Your backyard already has everything it needs. You just have to connect the pieces. Start one loop this weekend. The feed store can wait. A chicken tractor built from PVC pipe costs a fraction of a welded steel frame and still holds up for several full seasons of use. Adding wheels to one end of the tractor turns a 2-person lifting job into a 5-minute solo move across the garden. The size of your tractor should match your flock. Roughly 2 to 3 square feet per bird keeps everyone comfortable during the rotation. A tractor built too small forces overcrowding, which stresses the birds and reduces how effectively they work each bed. Cover crop seed for chicken forage is inexpensive enough that a single bag covers an entire season of rotation across multiple beds. Buckwheat is often the fastest establishing option, ready for chicken access in as little as 3 weeks after seeding. Clover has the added benefit of fixing nitrogen into the soil while it grows, improving the bed even before the chickens arrive. A mixed planting of clover and rye gives the flock both protein-rich greens and a carbohydrate source in the same rotation. Moringa trees planted in large containers can be moved indoors during freezing months in colder climates, extending their usable range. A single moringa tree pruned regularly stays bushy and productive rather than growing tall and difficult to harvest from. Comfrey's deep taproot is exactly why it survives drought conditions that would wilt most shallow-rooted garden plants completely. Cutting comfrey back hard actually encourages faster, denser regrowth compared to lightly trimming just the top leaves. Tree collards propagate easily from cuttings, meaning one established plant can seed an entire border for free within a year. A tree-collared hedge along a fence line doubles as a privacy screen while quietly producing chicken feed every week. Jerusalem artichoke tubers left in the ground over winter simply expand the patch on their own, without any replanting effort. Harvesting only what's needed each week, rather than digging the whole patch, keeps the remaining tubers fresh in natural cold storage. A worm bin positioned directly under roosting bars catches manure automatically, turning cleanup into a passive daily process. Red wigglers process roughly half their body weight in waste each day, which is why the bin keeps up with even a busy flock. Finished worm castings smell like clean earth rather than manure, which is the clearest sign the composting process finished properly. Selling surplus castings at a local farmer's market often covers the entire annual cost of running the worm bin, and then some. Garden waste fed to chickens should avoid anything from the onion or nightshade families, which can cause digestive issues in birds. Bolted lettuce and spent brassica leaves are both excellent, safe additions that chickens typically devour within minutes of tossing them in. A 5-gallon bucket kept near the garden for scraps makes the daily transfer to the flock a genuinely trivial extra step. Black soldier fly larvae bins work best in warm, humid conditions, making summer the peak production season for this protein source. A simple ramp inside the larvae bin lets mature larvae self-harvest by crawling out and dropping directly into a chicken feeder. That self-harvesting design means the larvae essentially deliver themselves to the flock without requiring any manual collection. Beehives placed near the garden and orchard maximize pollinator contact with every flowering plant during the critical bloom window. A Langstroth hive with removable frames makes inspection and honey harvest significantly easier for a beekeeper managing multiple systems. Bees foraging on comfrey, clover, and fruit tree blossoms rarely require supplemental feeding outside of extreme drought conditions. The pollination boost from even one hive is often visible within the first season, as fruit set noticeably increases on nearby trees. Tracking which zone feeds which zone on a simple hand-drawn map clarifies the entire loop faster than trying to hold it all in memory. A whiteboard near the coop door listing the current rotation schedule prevents accidentally leaving the tractor in one spot too long. The distance between zones matters enormously. Placing feed crops, compost, and coop within a short walk keeps daily maintenance effortless. A loop that requires a long walk between zones gets neglected within weeks, no matter how well designed it looks on paper. Egg quality is often the first visible sign the loop is working, with yolks deepening in color within the first few weeks of forage access. Shell strength improves as calcium-rich forage like dandelion and comfrey becomes a regular part of the flock's daily diet. Reduced feather pecking is another common report, since foraging occupies birds throughout the day instead of leaving them idle in a pen. The time investment for running the full 7-connection loop settles into roughly 20 minutes a day, once routines are established. That 20 minutes replaces what would otherwise be hours spent hauling feed bags and buying garden inputs every single month. A property running this loop for multiple years shows compounding soil improvement that continues well beyond the first season. Soil organic matter measured on loop-connected beds typically climbs year over year, as worm castings and compost cycle back in continuously. That improving soil means every subsequent planting grows faster and produces more than the cycle that came before it. The system genuinely gets easier and cheaper with time, which is the opposite of how most people expect homesteading costs to behave. None of these 7 connections require expensive equipment. Most can be built from materials already sitting around most properties. The real investment here is attention and sequence, not dollars, which is exactly what most people underestimate before starting. Small acreage was never the limiting factor. A disconnected layout was, And now every connection point has been laid out clearly. Every zone feeding the next zone is the entire design philosophy, repeated across 7 simple, low-cost, proven connections. That's the shift from a property that quietly drains money every month to one that quietly gets cheaper and more productive every season.